Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over this 10-part series on the MVC3 MusicStore. So far we went through Project 1 where we started our project, Part 2 where we did controllers, Part 3 where we did our view and view models, Part 4 which had our models and our data access where we added the database, and we're on Part 5. Now I tried doing Part 5 earlier, and I'm going to show you what I did and it didn't work. So I've come up with yet another way of doing it that may or may not work. So this Part 5 covers edit forms and templating. So in the last chapter we started getting our data from a database. All we were able to do though, as far as CRUD goes, was read, so we could display our data. Now we want to enable editing of data. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a store manager controller. Now, I'm going to do this a little bit differently, just so you're aware of it. Want that one. All right, and what I mean as far as doing it a little differently is I went in yesterday, I went into controllers, I right mouse clicked, chose add controller, and what the handout here or this online document says is that we are supposed to choose a controller with read-write actions and views using Entity Framework. The problem with that is we have a read-write and we have a views, but we don't have one that does both. So I had a problem getting that to work. So I'm going to try putting in here an empty controller, which means I'm going to have to add a lot of the code manually, but I want to see if that works. All right. Now the problem with that is I'm going to have to make sure that I go in and use the code to actually link things up. So we want to call this Store Manager Controller. I have no idea if this is going to work. I had problems with the in-class part yesterday. So mine worked until we got about, I don't know, 75, 85% of the way through. And then it stopped working, and I couldn't figure out what the error was, so I'm using a copy of one of the students, Ethan Wilson, and I have no problem, giving kudos for that. So I just did this, all right. Now it says when you click the Add button, you'll see that ASP.NET MVC scaffolding mechanism does a good amount of work for you. Well, it didn't. All right, and now that I think about it, I just want to see one thing quickly. If I right mouse click and choose Add, I don't know if I could, maybe I could do that with new scaffolded item. Maybe we could try that. So let's get rid of this. All right, I just got that store manager controller, so I'm going to get rid of that. You can see here I'm doing a lot of this right off the top of my head. So I'm going to right mouse click on controllers, choose add new scaffolded item. I want an MVC, I'm going to try an MVC controller with views using Entity Framework. I have no idea if this is going to work or not. So I'm clicking add, and we're going to see if we can get this to work. If it doesn't work, I'll go back to the empty controller. So what do I want here? I want Store Manager Controller, controller with read-write actions using Entity Framework, album, and MusicStore entities. So this should be album. This should be MusicStore entities. And the controller's name will be Store Manager. And that's what I got yesterday. There was an error running the selected code generator, unable to retrieve metadata for MVC MusicStore.models.album. I kept getting that particular error no matter what I did. All right, I actually created this. This is about the fourth time I've tried to create this particular controller. So I'm going to come in and do it like I told you to begin with. I'm going to choose Add Controller. I'm going to choose an empty controller, which means that I've got to basically put in all of the code myself, which is fine. Store Manager Controller, so there's the Store Manager Controller. There's my empty views file. So there's very little in here, so I'm going to have to add most of the stuff they show in here by hand and see if we can get it to work. When you click the Add button, you see that the scaffolding mechanism does a good amount of code for you. We don't have that. So I'm going to have to add my own views. All right. Hopefully they're going to show them in here. Okay. So hopefully they're going to show those in here. But if they don't, we'll make it work, even if I have to come back to this. So the author says that when you create a view, modeling a scaffolded view, so when you have these different views, they're going to get you started, but they're not going to put a lot of stuff in there for you. All right? So we're going to have to make changes. So in other words, it says, let's start with the Store Manager Index view. All right, so how do we do that? Well, again, this is kind of an ask backwards way of doing it. I don't even know if we can add here a new item. Can we add a new CS HTML file? I've never even tried doing that from here. I know there's HTML files, etc. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this index.html file, .cshtml file, copy it to the clipboard, go over into my Store Manager, and paste it in. All right, now bring this up, and I'm going to have to start making changes to it. All right, such as, Jeff. Well, the entire file is shown right here. So I'm going to grab all of it, except for this first line. Yeah, I'll grab all of it. That's fine. All right, I don't need that line that I added here. There. All right. Put a little white space in here just to make it a little easier to read. That's the only reason. All right. Now, don't worry if anything comes in here like this and is red, because we haven't set it up yet, so to speak. This is just the first file out of several that we have to put in here. So let's go back and see if it's explained here. All right, it's important to realize that while some code is generated for us, or as in our case, we have to copy it in, all right, it's boilerplate code, so it's meant to be added to. So it says, let's start with a quick edit. We want to display a table that lists the albums in our store when we click Edit or Details or Delete. All right, we're not going to use the album art URL field. So we've got the fields here. These are our headings: genre, artist, title, price, album art URL. Okay, so we're going to remove this. We don't need it. And then we have to come in here and do the same thing. So we have to remove this. So when we get done, you'll notice the album art URL isn't here, and it isn't here. All right? All right, we've got to start. It says now run the application and browse to the Store Manager. It displays the Store Manager index we have just modified. Well, I'm going to cheat here. What I mean is, I'm going to go to the finished product, which I've got here in my mess someplace, under MVC MusicStore Master. And I'm going to look in here under Controllers, and I'm going to find the Store Manager Controller and open that up and look at it in here. Now there's a lot of stuff in here that I think we put in later lessons. Hopefully everybody heard that. There's a lot of stuff that we put in here in later lessons. What I'm wondering is, if we go back to our article here, does it show us the actual code looking at the Store Manager Controller code? Good. That's what we'll want to see. All right, so that's fine. So I'm not able right now to go in there and run this. I've got these changes here made. So I've got this file done. I will give the class that file. All right. What we want to do is be able to run the application and get our edit, details, and delete for this. All right, and our create new. When you click edit, it should bring all of this up. If you click details, it should bring the details up for an album. If you click delete, it should come back and show you the details and say, do you want to delete that? We're not done with the store manager by no means, but we have a working controller and view code for CRUD operations to start from. So this is what I'm looking at. The store manager controller contains a good amount of information, so let's go through this code from top to bottom. The controller includes some standard namespaces for the MVC controller and a reference to our model's namespace. So I'm going to grab all of this. I'm going to have to change this right here from little MVC to big MVC. But I want to go into my store manager controller and start to build this thing the way that I'm showing it to you right now. Whether this is the right way to do it or not. In fact, was this, I hope this says store. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going into the store manager controller right now. All right. And the first thing I'm going to do is come down here and just literally replace what was in there with this. All right. This has to be a big MVC to start with. All right. So far, so good. All right, now you'll notice that right now, at least, I'm missing a couple curly braces. So there's not much in here right now. That's fine. All right, we're going to build this very piecemeal-like. All right. The index view retrieves a list of albums, including each album's referenced genre and artist information. The index view is following the references to the linked objects. So in other words, the next thing we want to put in is this, which is our store manager's, all right, index view. Let's put it in, go back and decompose it and talk about it. Now I would think this is part of the class, so that would have to go in here. All right, so here's our index right there. The store manager, so the index view, again, it'll allow us to display each genre artist, genre's name, and genre artist. So the controller is being efficient at querying this information. All right, so that's the index. The details view works exactly the same as the one we wrote previously. So it's going to come back and return us that. So let's go and put that in. Let's double check and make sure here. That looks good. So we now have our details and our index in here, in our store manager controller. All right. The create action method, as it says there, is a little bit different from what we've seen so far because they handle form input. So we want to be shown an empty form. As it says, this HTML page will contain a form element that has drop-down and text input elements where we can enter album details. After we fill that in, we can press the Save button to submit these changes back to the application to save it into our database. When the user presses Save, the form will perform a post back and submit the form as part of the post. ASP.NET MVC allows us to split the logic of these two scenarios. So in other words, we can have a post which is going to submit information and a get which is just designed to display information. All right? So we used the view bag earlier in this tutorial, as it says, but we haven't talked much about it. The view bag allows us to pass information to the view without a strongly typed model object. It's sort of a wild card. It's something that exists for us that we're able to use, pass things to, etc., and it's just there. So again, as it says, it allows us to pass information to the view without using a strongly typed model object. In this case, our get controller needs to pass both a list of genres and artists to the form to populate the drop-downs. So we want it set up, see if they show it here, that we get this stuff in here. So we don't have to pick a genre, we don't have to pick an artist. All right, we let the database pick those for us. Why? Because that's just a much better way of doing it. All right, as mentioned here, the viewBag is a dynamic object, meaning that you can type viewbag.anything without writing code, and you can define new properties. In this case, the controller code uses the viewbag genre ID and the viewbag artist ID, so that the drop-down values submitted will come right from the database, from the genre ID in the genre table, the artist ID in the artist table. Those are the album properties, as it says, they will be setting. These drop-down values are returned to the form using the select list object, so they'll look like this. This is the select list for genre ID. All right, so as you can see from the action code method, 3 parameters are being used here to create this object. All right, the list of items the drop-down will be displaying. It's not just a string, we're passing in the list of genres. The selected value. All right, this is how the select list knows to pre-select, so it knows its ID is what we want to show. And the property to be displayed. So this is what we're looking up, and this is what we're displaying. All right, with that in mind, it says here the HTTP GET create is pretty simple. 2 select lists are added to the view bag, and no model object is passed since it hasn't been created yet. So we're going to grab that. Copy. Come back in here. Come down. I'm going to give you all this code. We're going to sit and talk about it, but I'm going to give you the code. Now that isn't good. And that still didn't fix it. All right. Hopefully that's one of those errors that will kind of get fixed as we get going. But we'll see. Okay? All right. Okay, we're about halfway through with this, so let's see where we are for time. I like to keep these around 15 minutes. I'm already over, so I'm going to stop right here. So this will be Part 5a. I did a Part 5a originally. I'm going to get rid of that because it was nothing but problematic. I'm going to come back and hopefully we'll be a little further this time. See you soon.